Hello and welcome to the New Advisors webinar education series. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Liz Nottling and I'm the Director of Operations for New Advisors. Today, our webinar will be focused on the topic of traditional versus Roth retirement. Just our standard disclosures here. This presentation seminar does not constitute any form of advice nor recommendations to buy or sell any securities. We have our agenda today. We will be talking about who is a new, some of the monthly education events, Roth versus traditional, and then of course our Q&A. We do have a Q&A down in that little control bar that you have on your Zoom. Otherwise, you can ask at any time. Nick will go ahead and answer the questions at any time. Otherwise, there's the Q&A at the end. A little bit about Anew. We do work with leadership, with associations, and we do work with individuals as well. The faces behind the names. And one thing that we are definitely proud of is combined with our team, we have 60 years of financial experience and more than 60 years of firsthand experience with the first responder community. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Nick.
Yeah, thank you, Liz. So this is just a sampling of who we work with on the first responder side. Obviously, we have clients in the private sector as well, but really focused on our first responders here today. So now on our next slide, at Anew, we've really dedicated ourselves to the education side of this, and it really falls typically into three different buckets of education. Goal setting, decision making. We work a lot with leadership, whether that be budget or association planning, anything with the finances, goal setting, anything like that. But today, this is primarily focused on the individuals, obviously, right? With the Roth versus traditional, we're talking about how we save our dollars when it comes to our 401ks, 403bs, deferred comp plans, and that's in our Roth versus traditional buckets. Go to the next slide, Liz. All right, so traditional. When we say traditional or pre-tax, this is what a lot of people think of when they first start talking about saving in their deferred comp. This was the original intent under a lot of these tax codes, right? Because that's all these are, whether it's a 401k, 403b, 457. These are all tax codes set up for retiree saving. And so this traditional pre-tax bucket was the original setup. And what the idea was is that you put money into an account before you pay any taxes on it. And so then that account is going to grow over the course of your career. And then down the road, that's when you pay taxes. Whenever you take money out, take any distributions, most commonly at retirement, it's going to be taxed at your income rate at that time. And so this is where a lot of the conversation becomes like, well, do you think you're going to be in a lower tax bracket now or later? And we'll cover that in a little bit. But this is where you're going to pay taxes later, have it go into your account now, and then typically it's invested, right? So one thing I tell people here, when you start looking at your investments and whether it's in your pre-tax or Roth bucket, make sure it's invested, right? A lot of times these 457 plans, 401ks, they're going to have the default be a cash option, which you don't want to see. So use this opportunity and as a reminder to go check and make sure that you're actually investing these dollars as they go into your plan. Special rules for 457s on here too. And this is why this is such a important tax registration for us when we talk to mostly our first responder clients and some of our high income earners. When you have these 457 options, you're able to take out before 59 and a half. And so not only if you take up a 459 and a half in the private sector world, you're going to pay an additional 10% penalty and potentially a state penalty as well. But with your 457, your deferred comp, taking money out pre 59 and a half, you're after 50, you are going to be able to take that money out and you are not going to pay that additional penalty. You'll still pay taxes, right? You'll still pay Fed and state tax, but you won't pay the additional Fed and state penalty. And I do like that Liz included the note on here that some include a mandatory 20%. So even though you might be at adjusted rate of 17 or 15, whatever it may be. Some plans say, nope, there is a minimum 20% withholding on federal distributions, which is like giving more of your money to the government early, which we always like to avoid. And then there's Roth. This is where you're going to pay taxes now. You're going to pay taxes at your current tax rate. And so then you have to have the Roth for 5 years. We talk about this 5-year window a lot, right? Where we want this account open for 5 years because that's one of the rules before you can distribute funds. The other one is the normal 59 and a half. And so other special rules that come along with this Roth, you can always access your personal contributions to the plan. And so if something comes up where you need it, you can get to your contributions. Any penalty on earnings is going to be your income and tax or penalties. So taking money from your earnings can end up being costly as you go through your career, right? So then it's always important to talk to either us or your accountant before you start drawing money out of these to make sure you know when that first contribution was made. So you met your 5-year window, and then making sure that you're only taking contributions if you're going to take money out, because otherwise there can be some pretty hefty penalties. Some other exceptions where you can actually get funds from your Roth is going to be first-time home purchase, right? You can take some funds out of your Roth penalty-free for first-time home purchase, higher education expenses, disabled, and then medical insurance premiums if you're unemployed. So there are other things that we've used and other ways we've gotten funds out of Roths in these emergency scenarios where you might need funds. And so again, it's always important to talk to your advisor, to us, to your accountant to see how might I be able to get some of these funds out if you need to, right? This is normally one of the last things we want to touch, but there are ways for you to get it out. The other thing we talk about a lot too is for some of our higher income earners is how you get money in, right? So there are limits sometimes where if you make too much, they don't let you contribute to a Roth. Exceptions to these are your 401k or your deferred comp, your 457. So there's no income limits. And so that's why it becomes a really valuable tool to have these retirement plans in place that allow Roth, because you don't have to go to this backdoor Roth option where we make contributions to an IRA and then convert it over to Roth dollars. Because the downside of those conversions is you start a new 5-year window. So if you do a conversion, let's say we get close to retirement, we're going to have some conversations about when you need money. And it's going to be something where, okay, I want to convert 20,000 before I bump up to a new income tax bracket. That's great. But then we got to start a new 5-year window. We segregate out that conversion because there's different rules with these conversion dollars and when you can take them out. And so that's always a conversation we have to have. Next slide, Liz. And this is just a chart, real simple, going over again, just to review. When you pay your taxes, right? Traditionally, you pay taxes before Roth, you pay taxes later. Roth, you pay taxes up front, gross tax free. Withdrawals, taxed as income when you do it for your traditional. On your Roth, tax free when you take it out as long as you met your requirements. Penalties potentially on both. And now this best for always comes with a caveat. So this is just a general rule of thumb of what we see. Traditional, better for your higher income earners now because they're in these 32% or higher tax brackets. And then Roth, anytime we're younger, right? We're not in these high enough tax brackets. This comes with my caveat of specifically speaking to our first responder clients and attendees on the call. The reality for a lot of you guys is you're going to have a pension and you're probably not going to be in a lower income tax bracket, which is why we push Roth pretty hard because we don't see these taxes going down. And we'll show a money example here in a second. All right, and so we've talked a little bit about this, just some other rules and things we can do with some of these IRAs. If your spouse isn't working, we got a lot of clients where it's a single earner household. You can start some of these IRAs for your spouse, and we can make contributions for them. Contributions, remember, don't think just because December 31st comes along, you can't make your contributions. You can always make contributions for the previous year into either account for until tax time. right? So if you have an IRA or IRA or a Roth outside of your deferred comp, you can always make these contributions for the previous year, and we do that quite often. And again, don't forget to invest, and we got to make sure that we're doing that right. We're not sitting in cash accounts. And so on our next slide here, I believe we have contribution limits. Oh no, eligibility, sorry. So this is where I was talking about the income limits, right? So like from time to time, you're going to be at a point where you're single or married making over some of these dollar amounts. And this is where it starts to phase out whether or not you can contribute to a Roth. And so if you come into these income limits, your accountant tells you like, hey, made too much money, can't contribute to the Roth, there's still ways we can get money into a Roth. So this is where it's important to reach out and we can help you fund that still. And then here we go. Contribution limits for the year. Roth and traditional IRAs. Say you were to open your account at Charles Schwab. You have your Roth or traditional, you can contribute 7,000, or if you're over 50, you get an additional 1,000 as a catch-up. 457 and 401k, 23,000 limit there, 7,500 if you're over. There is also a special catch-up contribution for deferred comp for the 457, where if you're in your last 3 years, you can declare and you can make additional contributions, right? So always a good conversation to have depending on where you're at in earning, right? Might we want to put a little bit more away if you're already maxing it out? There are ways that we can put more away. And then coming soon for our 401k people, match is going to be able to be made into the Roth bucket, which is going to be a huge deal for people when saving. So traditionally, when you contribute to a 401k, if the employer matches, the match has always had to go into that pre-tax bucket. Well, that is not necessarily going to be the same anymore. Rules have changed, but now the record keepers, your platforms that you use for your 401ks, if you're getting a match, they are responsible for catching their technology up where now they can make Roth contributions with those match dollars. So if you're looking to fund those Roths and really max fund them, that's going to be another really great way to do it is from these extra catch-up contributions into Roth. And then this is the page where we talk about the math. And so this is an example of what it looks like, whether you're doing pre-tax or Roth. And this is going to get into why we're normally not shy about recommending Roth. We know everybody's individual position is different, and this is where I have to put the caveat, we are not accountants. And so this is just general advice that we give that we want everyone to at least start a Roth, and we recommend people use it. It might not be 100% right away, but at least start putting something into the Roth. And this plays out why. And so what you're seeing here is a salary of 100,000 and you're trying to put 6% in a year. And so if you're putting 6% or trying to fund $6,000 a year into your Roth, if you're doing it before tax, that 6,000 goes in. So then your salary that year looks like $94,000. When you do it in your Roth, it comes out after taxes. So your salary then is still that 100,000. Federal income tax is weighted, right? So when you do your adjusted, it'd be 17% if you were at 100,000 a year gross. The reason I don't have state on here is not all of our states pay state income tax, right? So we can have an individual conversation state by state on what the dollars might look like if you're in a state that doesn't pay state income taxes. And so what you're seeing here then is the amount of taxes on that remaining salary. And what you're seeing then, I'm going to jump down to this annual net take home pay, right? So your take home pay, when you do the IRA contribution, a little bit higher, right? About $1,000 a year because money came out before you paid taxes on it. And so that leads to a little bit more money in our pocket. And that's what we talk about a lot. And that's another caveat here. Some people need that cash flow. That $1,000 a year can make a big difference for some people and whether or not they're able to meet some of their expenses. And so we have to have a conversation on where Roth makes sense. So Roth, your income looks higher, right? 77,000, or sorry, looks lower because you paid after taxes or after home pay. So then you have 78,000 higher income. Still, we want to show the same level of contribution. And then what we're showing is just a 6% return year over year over a 35-year career. What's that balance look like? If you kept that the same the whole way through, at the end of your career, you would have 668,000 inside of either one of these accounts because we got the same amount of money going in. But now you got to start taking money out, right? And this is where now, as you start taking money out, same 17% tax rate, you're going to pay 113,000 in taxes on the pre-tax, leaving you with a balance after of 554,945 versus 668,000. Those Roth dollars grow tax free. Those dollars are yours. That dollar amount is coming to your pocket. And so this is where that difference is. So this is the account dollar value, right? That's the difference. And the net difference in your pocket. This is the difference between what you would have taken home in your career, right? That extra 1,020 a year versus what you have left in difference at the end. And you can see it's in favor of the Roth of about $78,000. That's the power of that tax-free growth over the length of a career, which is why we will normally not shy away from pushing Roth for most of our people, because in the end, if you stay disciplined, if you keep invested, the difference in dollar amount of your dollars that you get to keep at the end is significant, right? So you're talking a difference of $78,000 that you've put in your pocket by deciding to use Roth instead of pre-tax. So as it stands now, again, like I said, that's why we push a lot of people that direction. So again, these are some common scenarios we see, right? Young firefighters starting on the job, lower tax bracket. Roth is going to make a lot of sense. So when we get these guys early, when we're doing trainings, when we're doing onboarding, whether it be for some of our private sector clients or for our firefighters, our police officers, when we're doing in service, we tell a lot of these young guys and gals, start with Roth. If you start saving, let's get that Roth built right away, and we'll move people that direction. Once you get to the mid-career, so if you're an officer, right, you're starting to get into some of your higher earning years, you're starting to move through a lot of your promotions, there might be a conversation on whether or not we need to put some of this into pre-tax. You know, depending on some of our couples, right, where their joint income is pretty high, there might be an opportunity to keep some of this away from like one of those higher 32 to 38% tax brackets. So we might use Roth or pre-tax a little bit to push that number down. And then EMS professional at age 52, you know, this is where we might start to talk about how much that pension is going to be. How do we use Roth and pre-tax to balance how we want to start taking income? Do you need income? Are you going to work longer? Do you need to pull from anything? Do we need to do some conversions? Right? This is where, you know, if you're retiring 52, 53, we might have some opportunities where income isn't as high for a couple years and we can do some conversions to get more into Roth and get more tax-free growth into your retirement years. Next page, Liz. Before we go into questions, some other areas where I've used Roth. Because you can use it for education expenses, I have had people use it. Like if you're looking for a way to not leverage your retirement versus like kids' education, because you can take your contributions out and there are some rules for higher education expenses. I will have people start some Roths because you don't know what your kids are always going to do for school. I see Mike is on the call, Bongiorno, one of our team members. I use him as an example quite a bit because his kids went into the trades or they were good students, good kids, and got, you know, scholarships where they ended up not needing the money that Mike diligently saved, right? So the using the Roth doesn't pigeonhole you into some of that 529 where you can only use it for certain things. Sometimes 529s are great. I have one for my son, but it's not the only tool I use in order for saving. So there are other ways we can get creative in how we use some of these certain accounts to fund different goals as well. Any questions for me? You can put them in the questions or you can throw them in the chat. Raise your hand. You got a couple options at the bottom of the page. All right. Well, I'm not seeing
Not-
anything come through. Are you, Liz?
Nope, I'm not seeing anything
Okay.
come through either. We can always email. The QR codes will bring you to our website as well. And I do know that this webinar is recorded, so that will be available as well.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
And this will conclude our webinar.